Center for Environmental Health Equity. We're based at the University of Washington, and we are one of 18 thriving communities technical assistance centers focused on environmental justice and energy justice. And our technical assistance services, we cover Alaska, Washington, Idaho, and Oregon. And my colleague Allison will say a few more words about our center and our services, but why don't I also introduce our guest speaker today? We are very pleased to have as our guest Melissa Kep. Melissa is with Philanthropy Northwest, and she'll be describing a very exciting grant opportunity, the Thriving Communities Grant Program. Melissa is a writer, a listener who's honed her skills and knowledge in grant writing and support for equity and social justice throughout her career. She's a lifelong resident of Washington State, and she resides on the traditional lands of the Nisqually people. She's a proud citizen of the Chickasaw Nation and a student of the Chickasaw language. Melissa brings to Philanthropy Northwest her background working in fundraising and grant writing to support local social service nonprofits, as well as working in tribal government and national K-12 education consultation. She holds a bachelor's degree in history from Evergreen State College and a master's in public administration with a focus on nonprofit administration, also from Evergreen State College. We're very excited to have Melissa talk about the Thriving Communities Grantmakers Program. Before Melissa starts, I'll actually hand it over to my colleague, Allison Hirata, who also works with the Center for Environmental Health Equity, and she'll say a few more words about kind of our services before Melissa starts. Allison?
Hello, good afternoon. My name's Allison Hirata. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Tribal Outreach Manager at Center for Environmental Health Equity. I'm a descendant of the Karuk tribe, and my role is to do outreach work and technical assistance with tribes and tribally led organizations. So welcome. Thank you so much for coming today. And I'll just echo what Leah said in the chat. Feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. It's always good to know who is here and who's in community with us. I'm just going to give a little overview of our menu of services, our menu of technical assistance. You'll just see a short list here of some things that we offer, but we like to say this is like a menu that you might find at a restaurant in terms of, you look at the menu and you might see something that you like, or you might want to know if there's something else that can better meet your needs. And so in that case, you might ask the kitchen. But similarly, we just encourage folks, if you see our menu of services and there's nothing quite what you're looking for on there, we really encourage folks to reach out and contact us directly. And we are very happy to talk through what type of technical assistance you're specifically interested in and see where we can meet you where you're at. So with that being said, our contact information is on the slide. And again, we just encourage you to use any of those avenues, whether it's through our website, phone number, email, our technical assistance form, to get a hold of us. And just a reminder that this webinar is being recorded for your information. And I'll give a little bit more information at the end of this webinar about some specific opportunities that are coming up with technical assistance services through our center. But for now, I'm going to pass it on over to Melissa. Let her introduce herself and then take it away with her presentation. So I'll pass it off to you, Melissa.
Yakuki, thank you, Allison. Chokma hachin chokmata chu pasalitak asayopa, chikasha nompa okanosa holchafo hashonti, michin holo imanompa okanosa holchafo Melissa Kep, chikasha saya, micha chikasha saya ka ishtayopa. Hello, it's good to see you all today. My name is Melissa Kep. I'm a citizen of the Chickasaw Nation, and I'm a proud learner of the Chickasaw language, so I thought I'd share some of that with you today. I live in Rainier, Washington, on the traditional lands of the Nisqually people. And you heard my bio before, so I won't get it too much into that, but I'm very glad to be here and share more about the Thriving Communities Grant with you today. Next slide. So for those of you not familiar with Philanthropy Northwest, which is where I work, we are an almost 50-year-old funder network of philanthropies in Alaska, Idaho, Montana, Oregon, Washington, and Wyoming. The core of our work supports the field of philanthropy to be more equitable in who, how, and what we are funding with our philanthropic resources. And our recently adopted strategic plan, our North Star as an organization, is to move more resources and power to under-resourced communities that often have the greatest needs. And that is what led us to apply to become the regional grant maker for the EPA Thriving Communities Grant. We're a regional philanthropic organization. I tend to think of it more as like the membership association for foundations, like family foundations, community foundations, corporate foundations. And our members are all the way from small family-run foundations all the way to the large multi-million-dollar ones like Gates and Bezos. So the Thriving Communities grant opportunity that we're helping to distribute is federal EPA funding, and our goal is to make this more accessible so that Philanthropy Northwest can take on some of the administrative burdens that are a part of accessing federal grants, and to make it an easier process for grantees, especially smaller organizations, those who are new to federal funding, and newer community-based nonprofits. Our aim is to reach the communities and the people that don't get a lot of federal funding and are often overlooked in environmental justice work or are funded at lower levels than larger organizations are. Next slide, please. As you can see on the screen, the EPA grant is part of the Federal Justice 40 initiative. It's working to ensure that federal funding is distributed more equitably and reaches the communities that have been historically underserved, but have also experienced disproportionate harm. For this grant, this means that at least 40% of the funding is going to communities that have been underinvested in financially, but overburdened by the impact of pollution, including the remediation and reduction of legacy pollution. On the slide, you can also see the EPA definition of environmental justice, which aims for the fair treatment of all people, ensuring that we are all fully protected from disproportionate and adverse human health and climate change, the cumulative impacts of environmental and other burdens, and the legacy of racism or other structural or systemic barriers, and that we all have access to a healthy, sustainable, and resilient environment to live and work and play and learn and grow in, and to be able to engage in our cultural and subsistence practices. Key to the environmental justice is the fair treatment of all people and the involvement in the community. For this grant, we are looking to support community-based projects that are addressing the needs of the folks who live there and work there, and that the community is involved in identifying the problem and coming up with the solution. Next slide. So Philanthropy Northwest will be distributing $48 million through this opportunity across our region, which includes Alaska, Idaho, Oregon, Washington, and the tribal nations in these 4 states. We're focused on an equitable distribution across the region, including geographic equity. So there will be some fund balancing, ensuring that the funds are spread across the region, i.e. we don't want half the funding to just go to Seattle and Portland. We want to ensure our tribal communities and our rural folks also get the funding. So don't let, the competitiveness keep you from applying. We do have $48 million, and we are working to ensure it gets out equitably across all 4 states. We are using a peer review process for this grant. People who live in the 4 states will be reading and scoring these applications, and I'll go over that more later on. We're also committing to work with our applicants and grantees to support answering your questions on eligibility, accessing the application, and working in the application portal. And then once you are awarded, we're wanting to work with our grantees, especially those from smaller organizations, to help build internal capacity if needed to continue to be able to access federal funds. And I want you to know these are federal funds, so you do have to follow federal guidelines, including those around procurement and contracting. So we have some of those usual federal strings attached, but we're trying to reduce a lot of the paperwork burden that's involved in federal grants and reporting, so that's a less burdensome process for grantees to access the funds. I also want you to know that the EPA has shared with us that most grantees will likely need to have a quality assurance project plan or a QAP, which can add time and costs to your project. That shouldn't keep you from applying, but we want you to know that QAPs most likely will be required, and to keep that piece in mind when you're doing your work plan and timelining your project. And if you need to add costs for getting a QAP approved, to have that be part of your grant project also, the funding can cover that. Next slide. Here you can see the eligible organizations for the grant: nonprofits, community-based organizations, tribes and tribal governments, nonprofits, Native American organizations, local counties, bureaus and municipalities, institutes of higher education. I wanted to let you know this does include the Alaska Native corporations. They are eligible to apply under this funding, in addition to the folks listed on the screen. Next slide. So for the Thriving Communities grant, we have 3 types of grants. Type 1 is the assessment grants. Those are up to 1 year and are focused on projects that are seeking to gather information, assess and understand the problem before developing a plan. These are 1-year grants for up to $150,000. Our type 2 grants are the planning grants. Those can be for 1 or 2 years and are for those who already have an understanding of what the problem is and are ready to create the community plan to address those problems. Those can be 1 or 2-year grants, and they're for up to $250,000. The type 3 grants are your development or implementation grants for up to $350,000. Those have a 2-year grant period, and that's when you know what the problem is, you had the plan to address it, and now you're got your shovel-ready project to implement. And again, those are 2 years up to $350,000. We just opened our second round of applications at the beginning of the month, and all 3 types of grants are available to apply for this round. A couple of other things to know: this isn't designed for applicants to move from type 1 to type 2 to type 3. It's not a stepped approach. Think of it more as one-time funding. Review the 3 types that are available and think about what's going to be the best fit for your community and your project and your organization. I recommend think of things that you haven't been able to find funding sources for, or where other funding sources aren't really available to cover that, and how that would best be used to support those projects you're kind of missing the funding pieces for. Second, each organization can only receive 1 award so that we can ensure equity and a diverse spread of funds across the region to as many organizations as possible. It's not to discourage you from applying, but we don't want a significant portion of the funding to just go to a few large organizations. We really want to get the funding out to community-based groups and tribes and local governments that are working directly with the community members. And third, for those of you familiar with federal grants, there's no match requirement, so you don't have to deal with that on this one. And then again, we have all 3 types of grants available to apply for currently. However, for type 1 and type 2 grants, you do not have to submit a budget and budget narrative. The budget and budget narrative are only required for the type 3 grant applications. Once you're awarded, you will need to have a budget, So even if you're doing a type 1 or type 2 application, we recommend you still have your budget ready to go. You just won't need to submit it until you're awarded. Next slide. So here you can see a list of a few examples of types of projects under each of the 3 types of grants, and it's just a range of opportunities. Right now we're in the peer review portion for the first round of funding, so I don't have any funded projects to share of like an example of a successfully funded one, but we've definitely gotten a wide range of projects, including the ones that are listed on the screen. Want to make sure that you're addressing your community's environmental justice issue. And if it's not on the screen, that doesn't mean it's not eligible. Please feel free to reach out if you have any questions about eligibility of specific projects. And, you know, we want to hear what your need is and meet that need. And it's a pretty broad definition. So please reach out if you have questions about eligibility for your project. Next slide. So we also have a pool of non-competitive awards in addition to the 3 competitive types I've already described. These are grants of $75,000 for 1 year, and they're aimed at serving smaller, severely capacity-constrained organizations, which we are defining as organizations with a budget of under $500,000 or those that are serving areas with a population of 50,000 or less. That's just the eligibility criteria to be put into the pool. That's not exactly how we're going to base giving out the awards. There's currently 2 ways to get into that pool. First, if you apply for the competitive grants, but you're not awarded and you meet the eligibility criteria of being severely capacity constrained, we can move you into the non-competitive pool. And then second, later in the spring, we'll have a short intake form available on our website that you can fill out to kind of self-nominate yourself to be put into the pool for the non-competitive grants. And those will be distributed later this spring and summer. And the best way to, if you are interested in that and want to know when those intake forms are available, the best way to know is to go to the Philanthropy Northwest website and subscribe to our Thriving Communities newsletter. That's how we'll let everyone know when that intake form is ready. Next slide. So here you can see the timeline for the grant, where we are currently in our 2nd round of applications, which is open for all 3 types and closes on February 28th. The 3rd round opens March 1st, and the 4th round opens April 1st. Please note that the current round is the last time those type 3 projects are available. So if you're looking to apply for that implementation grant, this is kind of your last opportunity to do that. So get those applications for type 3 grants in by February 28th. I do get questions on if it's better to apply in an early round versus a later round. And it really depends on your organization and your project. We are not giving out all the funding in like the first 2 rounds. We're ensuring there's still funding available for each type in the later rounds. So if you need more time to develop your application or meet with partners to get your project fully fleshed out, you can definitely wait for a later round. There will still be funding available. So there isn't really a benefit for applying earlier versus later. And we have an estimate of how many grant awards we're giving out, but we think people have not, at least in our first round, have not been asking for the full amount for each grant. So we'll probably be giving out a larger number of awards than we anticipate. So that's good news. Next slide. Here you can see our anticipated award distribution. We are currently reviewing the first round of applications for type 3. We're only going to be giving about half of those out in the first round and about half in the second round. So there's still, plenty of opportunities out there for everyone to apply. And these are just estimates. Again, the total number of awards distributed could change as we progress through the application rounds and the non-competitive awards. We base these numbers assuming everyone would ask for the full amount, and they're not. So, we could have 80-something awards for planning instead of 77 as we estimated, just as an example. Next slide. So to access the application, you can go to the Thriving Communities section of the Philanthropy Northwest website, which I have a screenshot of here, and click on the circled button to access the grants portal. We're using the Flux portal for our application to manage both the application and the grant and the reports from the awardees. You'll have to register your organization in Flux and then set up your account to start your draft application. And we have a webinar on our website that you can watch if you need any support with that process. My biggest tip to you is to save often if you're applying. We have a Word template you can download and draft your narrative on there, which I highly recommend doing. And then, cutting and pasting your answers in there and saving after you do that, like save after you complete each section. Had a few folks who would do the whole application and then save it, and the system does not like that. It really wants you to save often, so I highly recommend that. We also have other webinars to help you with your application, including mapping, because we have some mapping on there for if you're in the EPA disadvantaged area or not. We're also requiring a work plan, and we have a webinar on how to fill out the work plan. And for the type 3 grants with the budgets, we have a webinar you can watch on how to do the budget. And remember, the budgets are only required for type 3. They're not required with the type 1 and type 2 applications. Next slide. Here we have the scoring criteria for the grants. We developed this criteria in partnership with our advisory group and task force, which is comprised of folks from several different philanthropic groups and nonprofits from across the region from diverse communities to ensure that the grant is accessible and equitable. This criteria was designed in part to ensure that we meet those Justice 40 goals and that the Justice 40 communities are prioritized and that we're meeting the needs of the people who have been under-resourced for many years. And as you can see on here, the budget's only being scored for those type 3 applications where the budget is required. Next slide. So this is the process that we are using to review our grants. First, we'll do an initial internal review of all the applications, ensuring that the applicants are eligible and their required materials are all included. Then the applications go to our peer reviewers who have all gone through a training on anti-bias and what the goals of the EPA funding are. They each score the grants individually and then come together as a small group to come to an agreed total score for each application. Those scores then go to our Philanthropy Northwest leadership team, which will review the scores and do some fund balancing if needed in order to ensure there's equitable geographic distribution of the funding and to ensure we're meeting those Justice 40 goals. Next slide. So we are also still recruiting for peer reviewers. Our peer reviewers currently and will continue to be from all 4 states in our region, Alaska, Idaho, Oregon, and Washington. And you can review for 1 or more rounds of funding. Each peer reviewer receives a small stipend to compensate them for their time. We're strongly encouraging our Native folks to apply to become peer reviewers, and I really want to ensure that we have Native folks well represented as part of our peer review team. Same with folks from Alaska. I want to ensure our Alaska folks, especially from our rural areas, are well represented. So if you want to apply, for example, if I was applying, I would recommend, hello, my name is Melissa. I'm a citizen of the Chickasaw Nation. I live in rural Washington. I'm very excited to apply to be a peer reviewer. So we are not asking specific questions, but if you could share how you identify and how you answer those questions, I would strongly encourage you to do that. And if your organization is not eligible to apply, or you're not applying for the grant, or maybe you already applied in the first round, then please consider being a peer reviewer. If you are working for a tribe or an organization that is applying, but you know someone else who might be a good peer reviewer, please forward that information on. And you can find the link to the peer review application in the FAQs, and I have that screenshot on the slide. Next slide. And I'm going to plug the TIC-TACs, including the Center for Environmental and Health Equity, because they are lovely to work with, and I know they've been a good resource to some of the applicants and potential applicants. Strongly encourage you to reach out to them if you need some more support or have questions on what was a good fit for you or not. You can also reach out to our other TIC-TAC, the Northwest Environmental Center, which is operated by some lovely folks down in Oregon. Next slide. And finally, here is the contact information for myself and our two other program officers, Jason and Jackie. We encourage you to reach out to us. You can email us or call us, or you can go to the Philanthropy Northwest website. We have links on there. You can schedule a one-on-one Zoom meeting with us. If you have questions on if your project is eligible, if you have application questions, if you need support accessing the Flux portal, any kind of questions, we'd love to answer them, love to meet with you. And I really like hearing about everyone's projects too. It's been kind of my favorite part so far. I love hearing what everyone wants to do and all the good work you're doing. And I think with that, we can move into some questions.
Yeah, thank you so much, Melissa. That was really comprehensive and super informative. So just want to raise my hands up to you and thank you so much for giving such a great presentation. And yeah, just we're opening it up to Q&A. So any questions that folks have, you're welcome to put them in the chat and then I can read them out loud. You can also come off mute and ask Melissa the question directly. Either are good. But I'll just give a few moments of silence to kind of create that space for any questions that folks have.
And I put the link to the peer review application in the chat.
Thank you. I have a question. This is Lucy from Anchorage, Alaska. Can an organization apply for each of those, one of those 1, 2, and 3? Because what if you apply for a 2 and then you won't get qualified for it, but your application for the 1 or 3 might? Just wondering.
Yeah, you can submit multiple applications, but you won't. We're only doing one award per organization. So you could submit one, and if you don't get it, submit another one or submit a couple different ones at the same time to see which one gets scored more highly. And if you're working on a project with a partner, maybe you could apply for one and the partner could apply for a different one to ensure you get your fair shot at the funding.
Thank
We have
you.
a question. Yeah, thank you, Lucy. We have a question in the chat. Can you provide more info on the quality assurance plan? What's in it? And is there a provided template that we can use?
That is an excellent question. So the Quality Assistance Assurance Plan, whatever QAP stands for, I can never quite remember. It's an EPA requirement to ensure that the environmental data is handled, meets all of their standards and guidelines, and that going in the future, it's data they can trust. The examples I usually think of are like air quality sampling, water quality sampling, that the plan would have like, here's how we're collecting it, how people are trained to collect it, how the samples are managed to ensure they are not contaminated. Those kinds of more science-y things, I think about them. I'm going to put a link in the chat, which I am now hoping goes out to everyone. Okay, this is to the Climate Justice Alliance. They have a good screener on questions to ask if you need a co-op or not. That's definitely something we will be supporting grantees with. We're actually hiring a firm to just kind of support us with that. So it will be it's not supposed to be a long process. The EPA has told us they'll be able to review these within 30 days. That may or may not be what happens. We all know how, best laid plans get laid aside. So it's like 2 or 3 months to put your co-op together, another month or two to get it reviewed. And then my example again, like the water sampling or air sampling, you create the plan on how you're going to collect those samples. You can't do the actual sampling until that plan is approved. So if you were funded to do that, you could hire your staff who are going to do the sampling, but you can't actually do that activity until that plan is approved. And that Climate Justice Alliance website also has some other good resources, including a webinar on what could be involved with the plan and how that would work with getting the EPA approval. But we will definitely support you through that process.
Thank you. Thank you for that question, Glenda. We have another question in the chat. The question is, to clarify, can one organization apply for the Philanthropy Northwest grant and then apply for the National Thriving Communities Grantmaker Program?
Another good question. If I'm remembering correctly, the national one wants to fund grants that are larger in scope or cross regions. So you wouldn't apply for the same project. For example, if you were doing something in Oregon, you would apply for the Philanthropy Northwest one. But if you're doing a larger project that was in, Oregon and California and Idaho and Wyoming and crossed across regions, then you apply to the national grant maker to do those larger projects that are covering multiple states and multiple regions. You should be able to get an award from each one, but I don't know that you could use the funding to fund the same, like a state-specific project.
Great. And our staff can also follow up with some information on that in like a follow-up email. It's a great question, and I know it's a big one that we have. And then the follow-up question is, when will the National Thriving Communities Grantmaker open? Melissa, do you know that off the top of your head? Otherwise, I can look up.
Don't, off the top of my head, I know the National West one is supposed to open at the end of the month, but I don't know about the nationwide one. I have not heard specifics yet.
Yeah, we can look into that and include that in a follow-up email. Absolutely. And just to clarify, Melissa, that is also my understanding about the National Thriving Community Grantmaker Program, as well as is that it's intended for projects that span across different regions. Are there other questions? I know I have a couple, but I don't want to take up room in front of someone who may have a question. Okay, while we're waiting for folks who may still be formulating their questions, I have a very specific question. It's kind of getting into the weeds, and we've already touched on it with the conversation around quality assurance project plans, but kind of going into that research aspect, because we are aware that there are some projects that will be delving into research. There's also this human subject research aspect. And I'm just wondering if you can speak a little bit to what that might mean, and are projects that involve research with human subjects or that qualify as a human subject research, are those eligible for this grant?
So we are not accepting projects that involved human subjects research. I'm not sure if that's an internal thing or an EPA thing, but we're not accepting applications for projects that involve human subjects research. However, that can be super broad sometimes, and we have gotten some applications where they're doing surveying that could fall under human subjects research, and will work with a grantee to kind of ensure that that could be updated and to work around that. For example, if you're just surveying your tribal members internally to know that, yes, this project was good, or no, if it's meeting the need and you're just using that information internally, that kind of a survey doesn't fall under human subjects review. So if you're doing things that could be human subjects related, if that's the main focus of your grant, you're definitely not going to be eligible. I have another screener on if it is potentially human subjects related that I'm going to drop into the chat again. Nope, that's the same one. That's the same one. One more time. Okay, my computer is not going to cooperate with me right now. There we go. But it's definitely, if you have a question about the human subjects review portion, definitely reach out to us to discuss that, because no, we're not funding human subjects review, but there's also things that you can ensure that your surveying or your outreach is not going to require that, because it's not part of a larger research project or systemic work.
Great, thank you. Thank you for all those links. Those are really helpful. Are there other questions?
I just want clarification. I was on the page, and I seen that a portion of funding could go towards capital, or no?
Yes, you can do a capital project or construction project. If you're doing land acquisition, up to 50% of the grant can cover that. So if you were going to do the $350,000 max, I think that a max of 175 could go towards land acquisition.
Okay. Thank you.
Right. I'll go ahead and ask another question I have, and then we have plenty of time. So if folks are eager to ask a question, yeah, there'll be plenty of time to do so. But I've also noticed that the different types, the type 1, 2, and 3, it seems like they're designed to be somewhat kind of open-ended in order to, not be too rigid in terms of, people feeling like, oh, they can only apply for type 1 or type 2 or type 3. And with that, I think there can be some crossover. It looks like there's some crossover and maybe even some confusion of, hey, what type is the best type for my project? So do you have any guidance or clarification for folks who are interested in applying for this grant on how to determine the best fit for their project, and whether that's type 1, type 2, or type 3?
Yeah, that is a question we do get. And it can be confusing because education and outreach is under each one. So where does it fit? And so definitely could look more at the overall scope of your project. Is this like we're implementing a curriculum that would be more of a type 3, or we're creating our partnership to put together the curriculum and develop it and how we would launch it out in the schools or after school programs. That might be more of a type 2. It can, yeah, if there's confusion about that, read through the RFA that's on the website, the request for applications. You can, look at other EPA screens and see how they're defining things. And then reach out to one of our program officers with any follow-up questions. We'll often, chat amongst ourselves like, hey, what do you think? Is this more of a type 1 or a type 2? And if you say you applied for a type 3 grant and reviewers scored you low because they thought it would be a better fit for a type 2, when we send you you did not apply, you can ask for feedback, and then you could reapply if time allows with this, moving that application into the type 2 round, just as an example.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is, for example, if my organization applies for a type 3 and it gets rejected, I will hear back that I did not receive, I'm not a recipient of that type for that grant, but I will get feedback and I will be kind of advised, or there'll be a suggestion of what type to reapply for.
Yeah, if in our feedback from the peer reviewers was this was great, but it's a better fit for a different type, we would let you know. Also, if you're just rejected and want to hear what the feedback was, we will meet with you and share that information also. And then you could reapply if there's time. We kind of condensed our timelines to make sure the funding gets out to everyone, so there may or may not be time to reapply, but we're hoping to be able to let folks know so there is time to reapply.
That's awesome. Thank you. We have another question in the chat. The question is, if we just recently acquired land and need support with building or construction of our project, should that be mentioned?
Yes, building construction, that's an allowable cost. You just have to make sure you're following whatever your internal procurement guidelines are. And then the federal ones, which is usually, you need to follow your sole source project policy if you're sole sourcing it. And you need to make sure you get multiple bids if you have a construction project to make sure you get the best cost that best meets your need. We have had a question, someone wanted to you don't have to have all of your bids for construction project come from your area. If you have to go out to a larger area to get bids for your project, you can do that. We just want to make sure that you could follow that fair procurement process. But yes, building, construction, those are allowable costs.
Thank you. And thank you for that question. Are there any other questions? Melissa, if this we'll give a little bit more time if any more questions arise, but I'm just wondering, is there anything that hasn't been mentioned yet today that you want to mention while we have this time for Q&A? Anything that you think that's any stone that hasn't been uncovered per se?
None that are coming to mind. I just really encourage everyone to apply, or if you don't have a project or your organization isn't eligible, please share the opportunity with other folks in your network, especially to our tribal communities and rural areas. I really want to ensure the funding gets out to all the corners and coastlines of each of the states in our region, and I'm really looking forward to having lots of tribal communities apply and be winning grantees. I'm very excited to spend time helping everyone with their projects over the next few years and apply to be a peer reviewer. Would love to see you be a peer reviewer if you're not interested in applying.
Great. Thank you. Well, it seems that we've maybe run our course with questions today. If anything pops up, you're always welcome to message us and we can help you find the answer. And so how about we go to the next slide and we'll just go over a few ways that our center, the Center for Environmental Health Equity, is offering technical assistance for this specific grant opportunity. So one of a few things, on this slide, you'll see some information about a grant application support cohort. The first cohort will run from mid-February to mid-March, and the second will be from mid-March to mid-April. And the intention of this cohort is to provide a scaffolded approach over the course of a month, meeting once a week, to completing an application. And so the idea is that After that 4 weeks, if you participate in this cohort, you'll walk away with a completed application that's ready for submission for that specific round. And thank you, Leah, for dropping the link for the sign up for the first cohort in the chat. So if that sounds of interest to you or you want to learn more, I encourage you to follow that link. And in that sign up is a lot of information about what to expect and the details of this cohort program. And just keep in mind that these cohorts are for the last 2 rounds of this grant opportunity. Right now we're in the second of 4 rounds, and the deadline for that is February 28th, and that's for all 3 types, as Melissa said. We are not offering a cohort for that one, so these cohorts are for the 3rd round and the 4th round. And the 3rd round is accepting type 1 and type 2 grants, and the 4th round is accepting only type 1 grants. So just keep that in mind as you may want to, for example, if you want to apply for a type 2, you'll want to and you are interested in this cohort program, you'll want to make sure that you sign up for the first cohort, as the second cohort will not be doing type 2 grants. So just things to keep in mind. You can also use that QR code that you see on the screen. And like I said, there's a lot more details about this cohort program in that link that Leah just put in the chat. I did just see a question come through, so I'm going to interrupt myself. And so the question is a literature review necessary? I'm working on a thesis, congratulations, and collected some data, but I'm wondering how much data is needed. So I'm assuming this is a question from Melissa. So Melissa, if you can answer that.
I'll attempt to answer.
Yeah.
The literature review is not necessary, but if you're doing data collection, you probably will need one of those quality assurance project plans. So that would add time and potentially cost to your grant application. And then if the data you're collecting would involve, like human subjects and interviews, then it would not be eligible.
Yeah, and let us know if you have further questions based on that, Eva. That's a great question. And then we have another question, another great question. What about collecting TEK, traditional ecological knowledge, to aid in program development?
That is a good question. Totally eligible and can be funded. Totally support the traditional ecological knowledge. I don't know that the EPA would require the project plan for that or not. That's a really good question that I'm going to take to other folks because part of me says, no, we don't need that. But then that's for the westernized science. But then the other part of me says, it's the EPA and they will make everyone jump through the same hoops. So if you could share your information with and if you feel comfortable putting your email in the chat, then I will get with my folks on my team and see if we can get an answer to that and send it to you because I don't know that I know that.
Great question. I haven't heard that one before either. Okay.
And
Awesome.
then the surveys is I had this concern also, like you're surveying folks internally for just like your internal project development versus you're surveying folks to gather community information to inform policy and make change like at a policy level was kind of the one of the lines I was seeing for on if you need that further review and planning. So it really depends on who you're surveying and why you are surveying them. Is it more for just internal knowledge or is this generalized knowledge we want to share and make public and kind of inform the public on?
Yeah, that's a great gray area question as well with the surveys. So, and there's so many different ways to do surveys. So, yeah, Additionally, I'll kind of go back to just the technical assistance that our center is offering. Oh, and then she just did a follow-up. It's not for policy change, but for adaptation of TEK data and trainings. Yeah,
Yeah, we'll think on that and get back to you.
yeah. Sounds like a great project. Yeah, so just a few other just technical assistance offerings from our center for this specific grant program. We are also offering application review, as in, you do your draft of your application and you just want some feedback, you want some other eyes on it. You're Feel free to contact us, send it on over, and then our internal staff will review and provide feedback from at least 2 reviewers. And we always strive to get that feedback back within a week of you submitting that to us. And just please keep in mind deadlines and dates. And so with this upcoming February 28th deadline, we are asking to please send any application you want for review by February 7th, so that we can ensure that we can get that back to you within a timely manner. So just, yeah, remember February 7th for that February 28th deadline. And then as we move through and go through more rounds, we'll announce other dates that align up with the deadlines for those third and fourth rounds. And then we're also in the process of developing some templates and resources specific to this application. One example is an MOU partnership template. Some applications will have partnerships that they're applying with for this application, and so like an MOU template can be helpful. And then we're also creating a comprehensive checklist because the application is low barrier, and there are lots of little bits and pieces. And so we're finding to facilitate making that process smooth and with more ease, just having a complete checklist of every single little bit and bob that you need, so that you're not going into the portal and discovering, oh, I forgot this one little thing that actually takes me an hour to figure out or a day to figure out, type of thing. And then today's webinar is also a resource. As we mentioned, we are recording this, so you can come back and reference this anytime, or anyone who could not attend today can watch it and hopefully get some questions answered and some more clarity on this specific grant program. So with that, just a reminder, if you'd like to reach out to our center to inquire more about our technical assistance in general or technical assistance specific to this application, this grant maker opportunity, all of our information is on this slide, and I'll put my phone number and email in the chat, so you can also reach out to me directly. And with that, I will pass it back to Edmund, who will close us out.
Well, thank you all for joining us once again, and thank you to our guest speaker, Melissa Kep, for providing such a great overview and details of the Grantmakers program. We look forward to lots and lots of applicants throughout our region. And as Allison mentioned, look forward to hearing from those of you who are interested in joining the upcoming cohorts. It's our way of providing assistance for some of the future rounds of the Grantmakers program. And I did hear about the Unite EJ program, that they are planning on launching their first cycle of applications later this month. And so do keep an eye out for the national Grantmakers program as well. That's another opportunity. And thank you all. Have a great day.
And really quickly, if you could take a couple minutes of your time to fill out a survey of today's webinar, we would super appreciate that. That information always helps guide and improve our programming. And so I believe Leah will put that survey link in the chat. We'll also send it out in an email, but even just a couple minutes of your time to fill that out will be immensely helpful to us. So yeah, thank you so much. And I think with that, we are complete. So have a great day, everyone. Take care.